Naperville, welcome to Real Talk. I'm so excited about this new podcast. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I've got a great guest today that I know you're going to be excited about. If you or one of your kids or somebody you know loves dinosaurs, prehistoric creatures, my guest is going to be super fascinating for you. So stick around. This is Real Talk.
This is the city we call our own. These are the stories of the people we call our neighbors. This is the heartbeat of our hometown. Naperville, this is Real Talk.
All right, so my guest today, I'm so excited to welcome. He has been finding fossils all over the earth for over 30 years. He's discovered dinosaurs on 5 continents, and he is a hometown guy right from Naperville and the professor at the University of Chicago. I'm so excited to welcome Professor Paul Sereno to the show. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So you grew up in Naperville, right? And you went to high school here?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about what was your experience growing up in Naperville?
Oh, I love Naperville. I'm as old as a dinosaur, you got to realize. So Naperville was, at the time, a small town. And, and then my roots actually go back quite far in Naperville. So my mother was one of the famous identical twins, Rita and Rena Bianucci, an Italian family that moved to town. There were Italians that left Chicago in the heyday of Al Capone, and they headed to Naperville, quieter towns, and Clinton and other places. And my grandfather settled and also in the peak of the Depression bought a farm that would end up being right between Bolingbrook and Naperville.
Okay.
At the time when I was a kid, it was a long drive out there. And we used to go out there all the time to work on the farm, right at the forks of the DuPage. We'd find arrowheads. It was a famous Indian area. And it eventually, in the course of the time from then to now, it's all filled in. And so this was a Naperville that was smaller. It was where you could drive a bike to the outskirts of town, and your parents would wonder, where you're coming back, and you really would get into greenery. And so this is where I learned my love of science. I learned it by Park District programs, by collecting toads, leaves, butterflies, and moths. I had a lot of siblings. I had 5 siblings. There'd be an alert. There's a butterfly. I mean, things that we don't actually see in Naperville today. Rare species of swallowtails and things like that. You needed more greenery, and
Wow.
it's something that has really changed. But so I have fond memories of Naperville growing up on Eagle Street, and I have fond memories of school, even though I was definitely the challenged of the lot of 6 kids. My siblings were brilliant, and then they would encounter me, and it was a totally different story. But that's and so that's, I have many fond memories. And my grandfather and the Italian family, they settled in right downtown Naperville, made the confectioner shop and a meat market, became quite well known. There's photographs of this meat market right on Jefferson Street, heart of town. And then my mom and her identical twin, my mom first, they married brothers, Portuguese brothers. My father comes from Hawaii, and each family had 6 kids at the same time. They grew up in California. We grew up in Naperville. We stuck around because my grandfather was here, and so that's the story of the twin families. In any case, fond memories.
That's neat. So there must be something about Italian sisters marrying brothers, because the same thing happened with my grandma and her sister married brothers. So I don't know, there's something about that, but that's an amazing, rich legacy. So you have a different lens on, Naperville than just the average resident. So in the area you're talking about, right, where the farm was, is like right very near like Knock Knolls. Would that be where you're talking about?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's
In fact, I went down there because I've dug up humans, and I noticed your office is, by the way, by a graveyard. And so I went down there, and you can still access the river. And I found, like a true archaeologist, I found a piece of the pump, the water pump that we used to use. It was a little water pump that we used to use by a cottage which my grandfather had built. And there's actually a cement wall that I built, a retaining wall to stop the river from moving sediment around, that pieces of it were still there. And like an archaeologist, I was able to pluck those up, and they're still in my house. But yeah, it's really grown and changed.
Wow, that's really neat to be able to do that. That's quite an experience. So you found yourself interested. It sounded like you were already interested in archaeology as a kid and in biology and nature. So what kind of springboarded you to the next step in that journey?
Well, so I was interested in nature, and I didn't do very much reading, but when I did read the Adventures of Huck Finn, that was what I wanted to be. Huck Finn. I wanted to go down the river. I used to look at the DuPage River and say, I'm going to go on this river because it's going to take me to Mississippi, and I want to go down the Mississippi River. I loved adventure, and I had really fond memories. I grew up in the south side of town, and Napier School was the school I went to, a small school, and I was in trouble there all the time. But I'll never forget my fifth grade teacher, who was the most fearsome teacher. She was already old at the time, and I knew that this was a disaster. My life was going to end when I got into Mrs. Williams' class, because she was going to crush dissenters and problem makers. And instead, I sort of got along with her, and she made me Tom Sawyer in the school play. And I will never forget that. It was a time when, she could see a kid that had some promise. I wasn't malevolent, and she reached me, and it was my day in the sunshine. I'll never forget that. I'm sitting in my office 40 years later, University of Chicago. I just announced a dinosaur from the Sahara. It made it around the world, made it into a little newspaper in Florida, and the Gainesville Reporter. And I get this call in my office. It was when we used to use regular phones, and about 15 years ago. And wavering voice on the other side, I don't know if you remember me, but my name is Arlene Williams. And I said, Mrs. Williams. She said, are you my Paul Sereno? And I said, I could never forget you, because you made me Tom Sawyer, and that changed things. So I look back to that experience. I call it a day in the sunshine. Every kid needs a day in the sunshine. And it has really influenced. I went on to have problems in sixth grade. There was a similar teacher I fell in love with, thankfully, a young teacher. I've tracked her down. She's in Colorado. She was married at the time. I had no idea. I just was starstruck, and that's why I didn't flunk sixth grade. But eventually I found myself in art, not science. I found myself in art. My mother was an artist, and by the time I got to high school, I did a painting. It turned everything around. All of a sudden I realized I could do something. It was going to be art. And I began to turn things around a little bit, and read a dictionary literally during lunch. Got into Northern Illinois University, was going to be an artist. And it was there in my junior year that I made a trip with my brother, actually, and I ended up at the American Museum of Natural History, the big Natural History Museum in New York, and I walked into the fossil hall, and it struck me like a ton of bricks. So never as a kid did I imagine being a paleontologist, but at that moment, I knew that that is what I was going to be, and I was going to go there and study it. This was just too incredible. And so I did. I packed my bags. Instead of going to New York and art, I ended up going to study fossils, and the rest was sort of history. But I got involved in all sorts of adventures as a graduate student, but I still had this reckoning. What I didn't want to do was turn into a fossil, get gray hair, having found a few bones, if I could. And what difference was that going to make to the world? I couldn't figure that out. So, but by the time I had planned my dissertation, a very adventuresome trip around the world. I had packed literally $15,000 in belts, 500 rolls of film, and I headed out. Wow. This was quite a few years ago, to China. No one could speak the language. The first year they opened up, I traveled 5,000 miles there, went on the Trans-Siberian, came across, went through a wall at the time, East Germany, West Germany. I made it. I got all 500 rolls out and 8 months. And I came back and I realized this discipline of paleontology is going to teach me more about the world than I could ever learn doing anything else. And people everywhere love fossils, and they love the natural history that's in their backyard, and they want to keep it there. They want to help you discover it. And so I have found ways since then to do those two things, to connect to kids, and the kids in the neighborhoods that never envisioned themselves as scientists. Those are the ones that remind me of myself as a kid, and very much. And I know exactly what they could do if they ever could funnel the energy in a productive way. And so that's decoding that secret is what I spent some time doing. And then figuring out, in the case of I've worked on all continents and dug up lots of dinosaurs and been wonderful adventures, but I have a special relationship with the Sahara, with Niger. It's a country that I've been back to many times. I've dug up maybe 100 tons of material, and I have 20, 30 species to name yet. And I'm going there in a few months again. And it's there that I really want to create museums, 22nd century museums that are energy zero, and will really be looked at as give the future, give that country a bit of a future in fossils and archaeology. There's incredible stories that I've been able to uncover in the Sahara.
So there's so many things I want to come back to that you just said that are like great talking points. I think just to touch back on your experience with your teachers, but I've talked to a lot of folks about child psychology and the things that happen and experiences we have in our past. And so many times we can focus on trauma or, something happens to us, or a moment, even just a moment in time as a child, and we carry that with us. And, in that moment, a lie was told to us, or we believed a lie about ourselves. And what you recalled was the exact opposite. And so rather than, and you may have traumas, we all do, but rather than a traumatic moment or a difficult moment that you carried with you that caused you to struggle, you had that moment that gave you confidence, and you carried that with you. And that says everything that it needs to say about the importance of teachers and about people encouraging people at a young age, to pursue those dreams or to do things they didn't think they could do. So then that parlays into what you were talking about with your interest in doing that for kids. And I think you're referring to Chicago Science Works. Is that correct?
Yeah. And we're changing the name of that, but yeah. And we're really expecting it's going to take off. And I hope to be a national model. There's no renewed interest both in Chicago at many levels in trying to see how we can make systemic change. And I'm at a university that is trying to be at the very forefront of science, the quantum internet. We're doing all these things. And I'm saying, wait, we can't figure out how to take these surrounding neighborhoods with us. Come on, we can figure this out.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult. They can offer Chicago public school students a full fellowship if they can make grade, and they can offer that because they know very few will make grade. So let's find a way that more can make grade, because they can. And I overcame many deficits myself. I had great parents. I had the great background of Naperville, which is a huge asset. Some kids throw it away. It's a huge asset. It's unbelievable. And so I had some advantages, but I had to overcome a lot of things. And so certainly the life lessons that I took with is every kid needs a day in the sunshine. The travesty of teaching, and I'm a teacher, is that you don't know what happens to 99% of the kids that come into your classroom. They go away, lead their lives, and it's rare that you ever see them again. And so you don't know if that kid in the back of the classroom that you felt was hopeless turn out to be doing something in this world. You just don't know. And that's why you can't ignore. Life is the second lesson. Everybody needs a day in the sunshine that I've taken from my experiences is that life is a long race. And if you think it's over at my venerable age, 63, 64, it's not. It can even be beginning. And, you know, don't let anybody count you out because you can start. The other thing, I'll tell you, a third lesson that I've learned, which is that if you lead a good life, you will love something that you thought you truly hated and had no talent in. I guarantee it. I hated writing. I couldn't understand it. I hated school. Now I'm a teacher. I hated writing. I'm one of the rare scientists that's actually written multiple stories in National Geographic magazine. That takes a certain sort of writing skill. It was very late in life that I came to love writing, and I couldn't understand it in college. You know, and it made no sense. How could I know what's good? And there are many things like that in the course of a well-lived life. I would say to take calculated risks. We tend to live with the risks that we have to every day. And if you're living in Chicago, there's plenty of them, and we accept them. And then we look at a place like Niger and we say, my God, you're going to be killed. You're going to be ice. You know, you'll last 5 seconds there in the middle of the desert, you know, bandits and so on. And I look at the situation. Yeah, I would be regarded as what I'm going to be doing in a few months as definitely Indiana Jones without the racism, without a question. It is, it is going to be, I'm exercising, so I'll be able to withstand it. It'll get up to 120. We're going to have armed guards. We're going to go out there because it's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
No different than our Wild West. You couldn't travel with covered wagons out there. There's no police. There's no roads. It's an area the size of, you know, multiple Illinois that we're going to be working in, and there's no roads. And so, yeah, I want to make sure that nothing happens. So I'm going to come with a small army, you know, and anyway, so, but I consider it wholly and totally different in risk than living in Chicago. If I had to run an expedition in downtown Chicago, no, I would say it's roughly comparable. Try and come out of that unscathed and bandit free. And so all you got to do is invite somebody from the middle of Sahara to Chicago. They're petrified. They think Al Capone is still alive, you know, and so anyway, it's all in how you approach life. And I think that taking, you know, Brené Brown, you know, talks about living life daringly. And that's what you want to try and do. And it keeps you young, keeps you alive, interested, and trying to do, you know, we're in a very strange age, I find today, where you have people who are trying to do many things that have perplexed us, making Naperville a better place, making Chicago a better place. And then you have people who are retrenching. It's part of our society that goes one way and the other way, retrenching and thinking selfishly and trying to go back to a time that we're never going to go back. The time is a one-dimensional thing. We're moving. We're moving onward. And so, but I think it's a hopeful time. And I'd like to be a part of that.
I think I want to go back to one of the things too you mentioned about, you asked yourself the question, you know, what does my career in this field do for the world, and what kind of an impact can I leave? And it caused me to think of my own wife, who is a zookeeper at Brookfield Zoo. So passionate about nature, biology, and more importantly, conservation. And one of the things that she would love to do throughout her career is travel and go to some of these countries where, you know, these megafauna are in great danger, rhinoceros and elephant and these species that, you know, we marvel at, that are disappearing. And a lot of it is due to a level of, well, perhaps greed, but also maybe ignorance. And I mean that in just the straightest way, you know, in some of these areas of the world where people don't understand how important these creatures are to the ecosystem and to our world. And so it makes me think of you and the impact you must be having, bringing light to these amazing discoveries in these sort of far corners. How are you seeing, when you talk about wanting to create museums like in Niger, have you been able to have interactions with the people and see just how their world changes when they get to view their country or their land in light of history and prehistory?
It's amazing. I think when I first traveled to the Sahara, you could run into people who didn't know what a dinosaur was. They thought it might be alive. This happens to be exactly what Westerners thought of the first fossils when we found them. The world is a lot smaller. It's gotten smaller every day. And they know about Jurassic Park. We showed the Jurassic Park film in Agadez, the center of the Sahara, for the first time years ago. And they have been my eyes in the desert. I've known them for decades, many of them. They've gone through rebellions to be respected in their own country. We actually called them and said, listen, can we run an expedition in the middle to rebel leaders who are in exile? We have nothing against Americans. Go run your expedition. We later ran into people who said, we knew you were there. We were going to attack you, but then we were told we couldn't. These are people who, there's many cultures in this very interesting country of Niger. And these are people who are still living, many of them, a nomadic lifestyle. This is the only place in the world where they're still living this lifestyle. And in the other pockets, like where I've worked in Gobi Desert and so on, there's mopeds now. It's gone. And they have a language, they have art, they have musical instruments and things. There's no museum to their culture or their language. And that's just one of the cultures or several. So the idea of putting a museum, putting some dinosaurs, and then of course I found the Green Sahara, which is, I've dug up 100 individuals older than the Egyptians, jewelry. The story of the Green Sahara is remarkable. I stumbled on it. I was teaching human anatomy, going to find dinosaurs and SuperCrocs, and I ended up finding the largest archaeological site of the Sahara. And so I had to become an archaeologist then as well. And that's the last 10 years of work. And incredible story of people living in the middle of a Green Sahara. The biggest climate change. We're experiencing one now, man-made. And this was the biggest climate change of the recent era, when the Sahara became the Sahara. Before it was green, with crocodiles and elephants and all the animals you know of from Africa in the middle of the Sahara. And Niger can tell this story. But I'm saying, yes, we will tell the Green Sahara story, put a dinosaur in a museum in Agadez, but we also want to put the region, we want to put the cultures, the language, so that there's a place for people to go as well as tourists, and in a museum that will be the first zero energy museum, natural history museum in the world, right there at the crossroads of the Sahara. That's the plan. And to do that, I had to contact architects downtown. I need a museum clad at least in local materials, tiles made by, and zero energy. Oh yeah, you got to withstand dust storms. And they designed it, and it's won awards. It's amazing. And I designed the inside and the structure. So that's the dream, and it's a necessary one, because if I don't do that, then all of my labors, all of the things that I found, the woman with a child, the triple burial, a child with a bracelet, first one ever found with an ivory bracelet on her upper arm, jewelry, dinosaurs, all this will go away. You can't preserve it without a proper museum, without shepherds in that museum. It's as simple as that. If I return it and do the thing to return it, first of all, I've become a diplomat to be able to remove from Africa more artifacts and materials. I believe I've actually, in terms of accomplishing things, changed the orbit of the Earth slightly, because I've actually moved it up here, and then I'm going to move it back. And you can't remove that kind of material without gaining the trust of the country and the local people, the regional people. And now we share a dream. Wow. And that dream is to build these museums, one in the capital, one in the middle of the desert. and it's a very interesting country at the very hub of our migration route. They're key to solving Europe's migration problem from Africa. We have a relationship with them. Other countries around them are falling apart. Niger still keeps going, and it's a very poor country, but it's got so much potential. So I'm very interested in seeing that project through. But it's a necessary thing, and it connects you with the region which has given you so much in terms of scientific discovery.
Well, that's incredible. That it is a lasting impact. I'm looking forward to seeing more from that project. I mean, that's incredible. Thank you. Okay, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about the topic that everybody has to talk about, and so dinosaurs, right? So I don't know if you've seen that meme. I'm sure you have. You're a paleontologist. That says shows a chart of your knowledge of dinosaurs, right? And it sort of peaks when you're 5, and then peaks a little bit higher when you're a paleontologist, and then maybe even higher when you're the parent of a 5-year-old. And so that's kind of where I find myself right now. So you have encountered, discovered, named some very significant and famous, world famous species of dinosaurs and prehistoric animals. And there's one, I'm going to shift my camera just a second here, and I actually have one on my shelf. So little toy of Sarcosuchus back there, the SuperCroc, which my son absolutely loves. So, I mean, can you just give us a snippet of some of the that you actually have dug up, some that you have named, and just please share.
Oh, one of the things about Africa is that, well, first of all, one of the things about dinosaurs that interests your kid and all kids is that it encourages us to imagine. And this is not just a makeup world. This is a real world. They can know the names. They can learn the habits and the character features of these animals, and they can quickly learn more than you know. And there's nothing more than a kid would want than that, because that's really what and who we are as humans. We're very curious animals, that unbelievable. And this is just like food for the mind. And it attracts kids. It's not their size. No, it's the fact that, and that a 3-year-old can look at a skeleton and understand what it is phenomenal. Just to imagine that they can understand there's once flash, that it's extinct. These are ideas that took us a long time to come to, are only couple centuries old. So, and then my dinosaurs, I mean, I headed to Africa. Actually, it was Tom Sawyer-like and Huck Finn-like. I was a professor. I managed to get a big grant, and I was attracted. I wanted to cross the Sahara once in my life. It's one of those things. There's no road that crosses the Sahara north-south. This is the largest desert in the world. Encompasses many countries. It really is out there. For me, it's more beautiful and more daunting than any mountain. And to cross it without a GPS, this is when I first did it, it's like going across an ocean, and they have many analogies to the sand seas and so on. It's absolute lunacy. It's wonderful. And I've crossed it many times now. And I crossed it, and I wanted to find a reason to come back, and I found a reason. I saw all these dinosaur bones laying around, and began to realize that this is really the last of all the continents to really completely discover a lost world. You might be able to find another T-Rex. I would say we can. There's a book coming out on Barnum Brown now detailing, I wrote the flap cover, how he found his bones and so on. And it's amazing how much has been found since then. And but to find another dinosaur the size of T-Rex that you can name, long shot. In Africa, you have a hard time digging up something that isn't new. And that's why I've gone back time and time again. And so I've named Jobaria, I've named NigerHeritage. These are bizarre long neck dinosaurs. I've named, we found the rest of Spinosaurus. I reinvented Carcharodontosaurus, was a fossil that was destroyed in World War II, found in Egypt originally. I've named Deltadromeus, the Delta runner. Those are the predators. And I've named lots of interesting herbivores. And then the surprise of all things, the first thing I found when I went to Sarah wasn't a dinosaur. It was a giant crocodile. So that's 40-foot SuperCroc, but the SuperCroc had friends, dog croc, duck croc. I'm going to name another I'm going to name another. It's a croc world there. The world that I'm uncovering in Africa is very different than T-Rex's world here. So here, the long necks sort of went out of the picture as the Cretaceous dawned, the last of the dinosaur epochs. And Tyrannosaurs came to the fore, really dominated the predators. And the duckbills and ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs, came to the fore as their prey. And that's the world. And there was small mammals running around. And I found these out west. And it doesn't describe Africa at all. So in Africa, you've got 3 different kinds of predators. You've got Spinosaurs, the most common, running around. There's nothing like that in North America. You've got long-necked dinosaurs mixing with sailed herbivores, and crocodiles run amok. You got pterosaurs and all, turtles of all kinds. It is a wonderful Pandora's box that I've opened up. And I can tell you that I'm going to name next a raptor that's digging. It's the first digging raptor ever discovered. I'm going to name some crocodiles that will shake your boots off. I mean, crocodiles don't have any armor and look more like dogs. Amazing things that we put together. And so it's a wonderful, and then on top of all of that, I'm digging up my own species. These are people that are our own species, 10,000 years old, older than the Egyptians, down to about 5,000 when the desert dried up and the delta that would become the fertile grounds of farming and history, as it were, dawned with the pyramids. This is the life before that has been extraordinary, the discoveries, and trying to, it's a totally different thing. In fact, it's sort of a little bit frightening when you're digging up your own species. You're normally used to digging up these bizarre new creatures, and all of a sudden you're staring at a skull and you're saying, my God, it's just amazing. And the stories that come from the grave are just amazing. Yeah.
I think the thing that, and I'm fascinated by the topics. And so the things that, as I've, been delving in with my son, and it's hard to imagine the scale of time that these animals, specifically dinosaurs, prehistoric animals, lived across. So you mentioned, from the Jurassic into the Cretaceous, the long necks sort of going away. But it's amazing to me that we'll talk about all these, we go to the toy store and all the dinosaurs are on the shelf together. And so we think of these sort of as all creatures that live together, but they're separated by, millions of years from one another. And then you mentioned by continents. I mean, so even I know in North America, right, there was the ocean that divided North America. So these creatures who lived in the western half and the eastern half would not have interacted with one another. I think that's what's a little confusing and what's actually amazing to learn about. What do you think are maybe some of the most misunderstood things about the field of paleontology, dinosaurs, or just even what you do for a living?
I think a lot of people think that all paleontologists go out in the field. At least half or more, maybe 2/3 don't. Here's another misunderstood thing that, it's a profession that you'll never get a job in. It's an expanding profession. So there's the Burpee Museum in Rockford that didn't exist when I was a kid. The Museum of the Rockies. There's dozens of museums that didn't exist when I was a kid. That's because people want to understand their history in their backyard. They're tired of having people take all the fossils somewhere else. And so there's places to become inspectors. There's jobs in laboratories and so on. So it's a field that's alive, and we're naming more dinosaurs now every day, every year than we ever did before. How long can that last? I would say until your son, I believe you have a son, has a son, we're going to be in this period of learning the basic outlines of Earth history, because fossils are the paleontology is this amazing thing that just keeps giving. It can't keep giving forever because the Earth is a finite size.
Sure.
But unlike living species, which we have found and we're driving to extinction, anything above the size of a microbe or perhaps a plant species, fossils, it's just amazing how big the Sahara, you really appreciate it, that I will not be the last person to describe things from Niger. I may describe the most, but there's absolutely no way that I want to feel that I've gone to at least the major corners. So someone doesn't describe some Shangri-La that said, Paul Sereno misses. It's a daunting task, but I feel as though I've sort of got the bases covered, maybe. But there's going to be more discoveries. So that's exciting. That's a misunderstood fact. Sometimes people think it's all discovered. There's no jobs. No, the field is very alive. There's a whole field of nanopaleontology, which is molecular. I got a guy, we're trying to figure out how dinosaur mummies form in my lab, where you get skin impressions and so on. It's very molecular. And what other things are basically, I think people have begun to catch on that birds, in fact, are dinosaurs. What do we mean by that? We mean they're the descendants of dinosaurs, and we therefore consider them dinosaurs. And misunderstood. Everything that you can name about a bird, if I ask you, tell me what a bird does, unique to birds. All that, every single feature that I guarantee that you would point out, whether it's feathers, brooding, large eggs, the voice box, we now have evidence that arose before they took to the air during the dinosaur era. That's a revelation. So people think birds are so different. No, they're actually were created piece by piece in the dinosaur era. We have every transitional fossil present. What other basic misconceptions? People think, this is a fundamental question I'd love to approach with a TV series. People think that the world was developed for us, or even worse, that we're the smartest thing that's ever existed. And even worse, that run the tape of life again, you get a human. I believe all that's wrong. I think that we are here as an incredible, wonderful, creative accident of history. And we can see that, I told you about name me anything of a bird, and it was invented by dinosaurs. We have evidence now. Well, name me anything except language, what we're using right now in this exchange. Opposing thumb, bipedality, big brain, vocal learning. It was all invented by dinosaurs before. I mean, birds and their predecessors. And so one of the questions is, why don't they look like us? I mean, some of them are pretty smart. Some of them use tools. They don't look like us, but they're very successful. I think that we are an extraordinary pathway that, and for people to understand, I believe it's exactly like my life and yours. I was born in Naperville. I had this incredible teacher in 5th grade I told you about. I was taken down to a farm. It shaped me in ways that were unique. Then I had this chance encounter with the museum dinosaur hall. And what would I have done if I didn't do that? Where would I have been? I would have led a different, unique life. My life right now is one pathway out of billions that I could have taken had I had different experiences. And it's like a winding pathway. It's unique. And that's the way to look at human evolution. And we should respect the world we live in and try to make it a better place, because this is our fleeting moment in time. And we alone can see it. We should appreciate it.
I love that you say make the world a better place. It's something I say to my son every morning when I drop him off at school. It's what more can we do? And like you say, and in the small time that we have here, what at the end of the day, when you look at your life, that's all that really matters.
Again, it's an interesting time where there's been this conception now, 22nd century skills. I see it's come together as a suite, generally 4 things. There used to be 21st century skills, and then we pass into the 20th. And some of those we thought were sort of the ultimate ones, right? Communication, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, maker spaces, things like that. And now we think of innovation, exploration. You think exploration? Yeah. And civic engagement and global citizenship. And I think those are those are increasingly the things that are going to mark this century, already marking this century. We have to think of civic, our choices are really impinging on everybody. And we need to become global citizens. And those are going to be some of the skills that, I'm going to be interested in promulgating in a place we're calling Cytopia Chicago, the science place, in this neighborhood.
So there's a million topics I could talk to you for hours, but you don't have the time for it. So what I want to ask you is, kind of circling back then to your beginning, for a kid on the south side of Chicago, or in a neighborhood in Naperville, or somewhere in Niger, maybe different paths for each of them, but they're interested in this subject like you eventually became. Where do they start if they want, and how do they take steps to try to do this for a living?
A lot of it is daring. It's just taking the chance and getting engaged. So, there's opportunities at museums, at your school, for after school projects, teachers that have some in. What my first experience was in paleontology was a neighbor who took us to the Braidwood coal mine, which allowed you to go into it at that time. It was a field trip. And so this is how people get engaged, and one thing leads to another. And I just accepted as a graduate student a kid from the South Side. This is really an amazing journey for this kid. He just persisted. He had a great parent who helped him, encouraged him. But one thing led to another. And he eventually interned at the Field Museum, and he stuck with it. And he went to DePaul, and then he stuck with it. And he went off to a master's program, and he stuck with it. And then he applied. And by the time he gets done, he's had a litany of experiences, and he's there. He's there. He understands what science is about and how to pursue it. And that's really what it takes. And it can lead you in lots of different ways. It can lead you into scholarship or academics. It can lead you into museum work. It can lead you into inspection work. There's all sorts of related sort of fields. And paleontologists are a bit, of a Cinderella field. I mean, I got my degree in geology, actually, but I was studying biology. And, there's no class Expedition 101, but I can guarantee you I could teach one. So I can take, any of my students can lead field trips. They can teach anything from human biology to geology, So when you come out, you can be a college teacher. You could be a high school teacher. There's a lot of different things you can do. But it's really, to get involved in almost anything, it's really sort of that push to try to engage, however you can do it.
Stay curious, right?
Stay curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, thank you so much. I mean, again, we could talk forever, and I'd love to do it again sometime. But thank you for joining us. And I think people are going to be encouraged, and I'd love to check in with you later and see what future
Absolutely.
Projects are doing.
Absolutely. I got a website, and you're welcome to, send people there. And
Yes.
It's got all the NigerHeritage projects. We call it NigerHeritage Museum projects. It's got stuff on the center that we're building and on the south side. And our discoveries are going to be announced there.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll get all that info and make sure that it's linked below on the podcast here. So thanks again. And we're looking forward to talking to you again sometime.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.